Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her gloved hand against the cracked viewport of the research shuttle, watching the desolate planet Zirian Prime grow larger beneath them. The brownish-red surface stretched endlessly, broken only by jagged mountain ranges and dried riverbeds that spoke of a world slowly dying. Her breath fogged the reinforced glass as she studied the terrain where their long-range scanners had detected unusual life signatures. Landing in 30 seconds, Doc called Marcus Webb from the pilot's seat. The grizzled veteran had flown more rescue missions than anyone in the Terran Medical Corps, but even he seemed tense as they approached the coordinates. Atmospheric readings are stable, but I'm keeping the engines warm. This place gives me the creeps. Sarah nodded, checking her medical kit one final time. The emergency beacon they'd received 3 days ago had been weak and fragmented, but the translation algorithms had managed to decode enough to understand the desperation behind it. Something about young ones dying, about abandonment and betrayal. The signal had cut out before they could get more details, but the Terran Council had immediately authorized a medical response team. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud on the rocky surface. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the ruins of what had once been a magnificent city. Towering spires lay broken and scattered, their crystalline surfaces dulled by centuries of neglect. Vegetation had begun to reclaim some structures, but it looked sickly and sparse. Whatever had happened to this world, it had been thorough and devastating. Atmosphere's breathable, Marcus reported, running through his post-landing checks. Gravity's about 0.8 standard. Temperature's a bit chilly, but your suit should handle it fine. Sarah stood and shouldered her medical pack. The weight of it was familiar and comforting after 12 years of emergency medical work across the galaxy. She'd treated everything from radiation poisoning on mining asteroids to plague outbreaks on colony worlds. But something about this mission felt different. The desperation in that fragmented transmission had haunted her dreams for 3 nights running. "Remember, Doc, we stick to the plan," Marcus said as he powered down the non-essential systems. 2 hours maximum. If we don't find anything by then, we leave. The brass was real clear about that. 2 hours should be plenty, Sarah replied, though privately she wondered if it would be enough. The life signs their scanners had detected were faint and scattered across nearly 10 square kilometers of ruins. Finding the source would be like looking for needles in a haystack. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Sarah stepped out onto the alien world. The air was thin and carried a metallic tang that made her nose wrinkle. In the distance, she could hear something that might have been wind whistling through the broken spires, but underneath it was another sound. Something that made her heart skip a beat. It sounded almost like crying. Sarah activated her scanner and began moving toward the nearest cluster of ruins. The device painted a 3-dimensional map in her visor, highlighting potential life signs with pulsing red dots. Most were clustered around what appeared to have been some kind of central plaza, but they were so faint that her equipment could barely detect them. The crying sound grew louder as she picked her way through the rubble-strewn streets. It was definitely organic, and definitely coming from something in distress. Sarah increased her pace, her medical training overriding any concerns about potential dangers. Whatever was making that sound needed help, and needed it soon. She rounded a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. In the center of what had once been a beautiful garden plaza lay 5 creatures unlike anything she'd ever seen. They were roughly the size of large dogs, but their resemblance to any earth animal ended there. Each one had scales that shifted color from deep blue to silver, depending on how the weak sunlight hit them. For legs ended in delicate claws, and their necks were long and graceful. Most striking of all were the partially formed wings folded against their sides, and the intelligent golden eyes that tracked her movement as she approached. Dragons, or at least what Earth mythology would have called dragons. But these were clearly juveniles, and they were dying. Sarah's medical scanner confirmed what her eyes could already see. The creatures were severely malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of exposure-related illness. Their scales had lost much of their luster, and their breathing was labored. The smallest one, barely the size of a house cat, lay completely still except for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. "My God," Sarah whispered, slowly approaching the group. The largest of the young dragons, probably no more than a year old based on its size, raised its head weakly and made a sound that was part whimper, part chirp. The others responded with similar sounds, but they lacked the strength to lift their heads. Sarah knelt carefully at the edge of their little circle and began unpacking her medical kit. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar routine of triage assessment while her mind raced. These were clearly intelligent beings, but they were so young. Where were their parents? Their caregivers? What had happened to leave them here alone to die? The largest dragonling watched her with those impossibly expressive golden eyes as she ran a passive scan. Its basic physiology was surprisingly similar to Earth reptiles, but with significant differences. Their internal temperature was higher than expected, and their heart rate was far too slow for creatures their size. Most concerning was the energy signature her scanner detected. These weren't just animals. They showed the same kind of neural activity patterns associated with sapient species. "Marcus," she called into her comm unit, keeping her voice low and soothing. "I need you to contact the ship and request an emergency xenobiology consultation. We've got 5 juvenile dragons here, and they're in critical condition." "Did you just say dragons, Doc?" "You heard me correctly. Sending you scan data now." Sarah attached a small transmitter to her scanner and uploaded the preliminary readings. While the data transferred, she began a more detailed examination of the nearest dragonling. Its breathing was shallow and irregular, and when she gently lifted one of its eyelids, the pupil response was sluggish. Severe dehydration was the immediate threat. Sarah pulled out an 4 kit and began assembling the components. The challenge would be finding a vein, but her scanner could help with that. These creatures might look alien, but the basic principles of emergency medicine were universal. The largest dragonling made no attempt to resist as Sarah carefully inserted the 4 line. If anything, it seemed to understand that she was trying to help. Its golden eyes never left her face, and she could swear she saw something like gratitude in their depths. "That's it, little one," she murmured, adjusting the flow rate on the 4 bag. "We're going to take care of you." As the saline solution began flowing into the Dragonlings system, Sarah moved on to the next one. This one was slightly smaller and seemed even weaker. Its scales had taken on a grayish tint that her medical training told her was a very bad sign. She worked quickly to establish a second 4 line while keeping one eye on her scanner readings. "Doc, I'm getting some weird energy readings from your location." Marcus's voice crackled through the comm. "Nothing dangerous, but the ship's asking if you're using some kind of new medical equipment." Sarah paused in her work and checked her own scanner. There was indeed an unusual energy signature building in the area, but it wasn't coming from her equipment. It seemed to be emanating from the Dragonlings themselves. As she watched, the readings grew stronger, centered around the largest one she'd already treated. The Dragonling's eyes had grown brighter, and its breathing had become more regular. Even more remarkably, Sarah could swear its scales were beginning to regain some of their color. The 4 was working faster than should have been possible, as if the creature's metabolism was somehow accelerating the healing process. "I'm not sure what's happening here, Marcus," Sarah admitted, moving to the 3rd dragonling. This one was even smaller than the others, probably the youngest of the group. Its eyes were closed, and for a moment Sarah feared she was too late. But her scanner detected a faint heartbeat, and she quickly began establishing another 4 line. As she worked, Sarah became aware of a new sound. It was coming from the largest dragonling, a low humming that seemed to resonate through the ground itself. The sound was oddly comforting, almost hypnotic, and Sarah found herself working with unusual focus and precision. The 3rd dragonling's eyes fluttered open as the 4 began flowing. They were the same golden color as the others, but Sarah thought she detected something different in their depths. Where the first had shown gratitude, this one seemed to be trying to communicate something more complex. It made a soft chirping sound and turned its head toward the smallest dragonling, the one that had been lying motionless. Sarah followed its gaze and felt her heart sink. The smallest dragonling's breathing had become even more shallow, and her scanner was showing critical readings across the board. This one needed more than just an 4. It needed immediate intervention or it would die within the hour. She moved quickly to the tiny creature's side and began a more intensive examination. Its body temperature was dangerously low, and its pulse was barely detectable. Sarah pulled out an emergency stimulant from her kit, but hesitated. The drug was designed for human physiology. There was no telling how it might affect an alien species. The largest dragonling seemed to sense her hesitation. It struggled to lift its head and looked directly at Sarah with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Then, it did something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It spoke. The words were in no language Sarah recognized, but somehow she understood them anyway. The meaning seemed to flow directly into her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. "Please save, little sister." Sarah stared at the creature in shock. Telepathy. They were telepathic. That explained the energy readings, the unusual recovery rate, and the feeling she'd had that they were trying to communicate with her. "I'll do everything I can," Sarah whispered back, not sure if the creature could understand her spoken words, but hoping the emotional content would come through. She made her decision and administered a carefully calculated dose of the stimulant to the smallest dragonling. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the tiny creature's breathing began to strengthen, and its heart rate picked up. "Doc, you need to see this." Marcus's voice cut through her concentration. "The energy readings just spiked, and I'm getting some kind of structured signal. Almost like they're talking to each other." Sarah looked around at the 5 dragonlings and realized he was right. The humming sound had spread to all of them, creating a complex harmony that seemed to pulse with meaning. She could feel it at the edge of her consciousness, like a conversation happening just beyond her ability to fully understand. "They're telepathic, Marcus," she reported, establishing 4 lines for the remaining 2 dragonlings. "And they're definitely sapient. These aren't just animals, they're people. Jesus, document the implications of this." Sarah knew what he meant. First contact with a telepathic species was supposed to involve teams of specialists, months of preparation, and careful protocols. Instead, she was performing emergency medical treatment in the ruins of their civilization while they died around her. But, as she looked at the 5 young faces watching her with growing hope and trust, Sarah knew she couldn't have done anything differently. They were children, and they were dying. Everything else was secondary to that basic fact. The 4th dragonling was responding well to treatment, its scales already beginning to brighten. But the 5th one, positioned slightly apart from the others, was presenting new challenges. This one was larger than the rest, probably close to adolescence, and its physiology showed subtle differences that suggested it might be from a different subspecies. More importantly, it was conscious and wary. As Sarah approached with her medical kit, the adolescent dragonling pulled back and made a warning sound that was definitely not friendly. Its golden eyes tracked her every movement, and Sarah could feel something pressing against her mind, not words, but emotions. Fear, suspicion, and a fierce protectiveness that made her take a step back. "Easy there," Sarah said softly, setting her kit down and showing her empty hands. "I just want to help." The creature's response came not as words but as a flood of images and emotions that nearly drove Sarah to her knees. She saw flashes of a magnificent city full of dragons of all ages, their scales gleaming like jewels in the sunlight. She saw the sky filled with adult dragons, their wings casting shadows over crystalline spires that sang in harmonious frequencies. Then, the images turned dark. Ships in the sky, but not dragon ships. Weapons firing from orbit, reducing the beautiful city to rubble. Adult dragons falling from the sky, their wings burned and broken. And, through it all, a sense of betrayal so profound that Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. "The Zephyrians," the adolescent's voice whispered in her mind. "They promised peace, promised partnership, but they wanted only our world, our songs." Sarah understood now why the young dragons had been abandoned here. This wasn't neglect, it was genocide. Their species had been betrayed by allies who had then systematically exterminated them. These 5 might be the only survivors. "I'm not a Zephyrian," Sarah said aloud, hoping the creature could sense the truth in her words. "I'm human. We received your distress call and came to help." The adolescent studied her for a long moment, and Sarah could feel it probing gently at her mind. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant. like having someone carefully examine her thoughts without judgment. Human, the voice repeated, and Sarah sensed a flood of curiosity along with the word. You are different. Your thoughts are warm. Sarah smiled despite the tears still running down her face. We try to be. Will you let me help you? The adolescent dragon considered this for several seconds, then slowly moved closer. As Sarah began her examination, she could feel the creature's barriers lowering, allowing her to sense more of its thoughts and emotions. Its name was Kirith, and it was indeed older than the others, nearly 2 years old in dragon terms, which made it roughly equivalent to a human teenager. It had been trying to protect the younger ones since the attack, but without adult dragons to provide food and guidance, it had been a losing battle. The other 4 were its clutch siblings, all born within days of each other in what had been one of the last peaceful times their world had known. The smallest, the one Sarah had saved with the stimulant, was called Pip. The largest was Aaron, who had first spoken to Sarah. The other 2 were Lyra and Zara, identical twins who shared an even deeper telepathic bond than the rest. As Sarah worked to stabilize Kirith's condition, she learned more about their species. The dragons were natural empaths and telepaths, able to share thoughts and emotions across vast distances. Their entire civilization had been built around this ability, with complex songs and harmonies that could carry meaning across continents. But that same gift had made them vulnerable to the Zephyrians, who had used their empathic nature against them. The betrayal hadn't just been military. It had been psychological and emotional, striking at the very core of what made the dragons who they were. They made us trust, Kirith explained as Sarah checked its vital signs. Their minds felt clean, honest. We opened ourselves to them completely. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered, and meant it. The scale of the tragedy was staggering, an entire civilization destroyed by those they had trusted most. Your species? Kirith asked carefully. You are not like the Zephyrians? Sarah thought about how to answer that. Humanity certainly had its dark chapters, times when they had betrayed trust and committed terrible acts. But she also thought about the Terran Medical Corps, about the rescue missions to worlds they'd never seen before, about the simple fact that she was here risking her life to save 5 alien children. We try to be better, she said finally. We don't always succeed, but we try. Kirith was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could sense it processing this response. Then, to her surprise, she felt a gentle touch of amusement. An honest answer. The Zephyrians would have claimed perfection. Sarah finished establishing Kirith's 4-line and checked her chronometer. They'd been on the surface for over an hour, and Marcus would be getting nervous. But she couldn't leave now, not when the Dragonlings were finally stable and beginning to recover. Marcus, she called into her calm, I need to extend our timeline. These aren't just refugees, they're survivors of a genocide. I can't abandon them. Doc, you know I'd follow you into hell itself, but the orders were clear. 2 hours maximum. Then, we take them with us. The silence that followed was telling. Sarah knew what Marcus was thinking, the same thing she was thinking. 5 alien refugees would complicate everything. There would be quarantine procedures, political implications, and enough red tape to strangle a bureaucrat. But, as she looked at the 5 young faces watching her with hope and trust, Sarah knew she couldn't leave them behind. Can they travel? Marcus asked finally. Sarah checked her scanner readings. The IVs were working beautifully, and all 5 Dragonlings were showing marked improvement. More importantly, she could feel their mental state improving as well. The despair that had been crushing them was lifting, replaced by something she hadn't expected to find in genocide survivors. Hope. With portable life support, yes. But, Marcus, they're telepathic. Once we get them on the ship, everything changes. This becomes first contact. Yeah, I figured. Doc, you sure about this? Sarah looked at Aaron, the first Dragonling she'd treated. Its scales had regained much of their luster, and its golden eyes were bright and alert. When it saw her looking, it made a soft chirping sound that somehow conveyed both gratitude and affection. I'm sure. The next 30 minutes were a blur of activity. Sarah worked to prepare the Dragonlings for transport while Marcus brought the shuttle closer to their location. The youngest ones would need to be carried, but Kirith and Aaron were strong enough to walk short distances. As Sarah packed up her medical equipment, She became aware that the Dragonlings were having some kind of group conversation. She could feel the edges of it, a complex weaving of thoughts and emotions that reminded her of a musical composition. When they finished, Aaron approached her carefully. "Dr. Chun," it said, and Sarah was startled to hear her name. "Kirith must have shared the information with the others. We wish to ask something of you." "Of course. What is it?" "Our people, they had many songs, stories, histories. When the Zephyrians destroyed our world, they tried to destroy our knowledge as well. But we remember some things." Aaron paused, and Sarah could sense it gathering courage for whatever it wanted to say next. "If you take us with you, we would like to share these songs with your people, so that our species is not completely forgotten." Sarah felt her throat tighten. These children had lost everything: their families, their world, their entire civilization. But instead of focusing on their own survival, they were thinking about preserving the memory of their people. "We would be honored to hear your songs," Sarah said, and meant every word. The shuttle's engines grew louder as Marcus brought it in for landing. Through the viewport, Sarah could see him running through the pre-flight checklist with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. "All right, everyone," Sarah announced, switching to a brisk professional tone that helped mask her own nervousness. "Time to go home." As she helped the Dragonlings board the shuttle, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what they were bringing back to Earth. 5 refugee children, yes, but also something far more significant. First contact with a telepathic species. Survivors of genocide who carried with them the songs and stories of their entire civilization. And, perhaps most importantly, a test of humanity's capacity for compassion toward those who were different from themselves. Marcus secured the Dragonlings in the shuttle's medical bay while Sarah double-checked their 4 lines and monitored their vital signs. All 5 were stable, though they would need more extensive treatment once they reached the ship. "Ready for takeoff, Doc?" Sarah looked out the viewport at the ruins of the Dragon City one last time. In a few hours, xenoarchaeology teams would probably be dispatched to study what remained of this civilization. But, for now, it was just a monument to what had been lost. "Ready," she confirmed. As the shuttle lifted off from Zirian Prime, Sarah felt a gentle touch against her mind. Not words, but a complex harmony that seemed to express gratitude, hope, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Trust. These children were trusting her with their lives, their stories, and the memory of their people. It was a responsibility that both terrified and humbled her. But, as she watched the planet fall away beneath them, Sarah found herself looking forward to hearing their songs. The medical bay of the TMS Meridian hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Chun worked alongside her expanded team to treat the 5 Dragonling refugees. 3 days had passed since their rescue from Zirian Prime, and the young dragons were responding to treatment better than anyone had dared hope. The ship's chief medical officer, Dr. James Harrison, watched the proceedings with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Cellular regeneration rates are unlike anything we've documented," Harrison murmured, studying the latest scan results on his tablet. "They're healing at nearly 3 times the normal rate for reptilian species. And these neural activity patterns. They're telepathic," Sarah confirmed, adjusting the nutrient feed for Pip, the smallest of the Dragonlings. The tiny creature had grown visibly stronger over the past few days, her scales now showing hints of the vibrant blue-silver they were meant to be. But it's more complex than simple thought-sharing. They seem to have some kind of collective consciousness. As if summoned by her words, Aaron's voice whispered into her mind. The largest of the young dragons had become something of a spokesperson for the group, though Sarah suspected the decision-making process among them was far more democratic than human children would manage. "Dr. Chun, we would like to speak with more of your people. We have questions about your ship, your species, your songs." Sarah smiled and looked over at the Dragonling. Aaron was propped up on a specially designed medical bed, fur still running into his forearm, but his golden eyes bright and alert. "I think that can be arranged. Dr. Harrison here is our chief medical officer. He's been very interested in learning about your physiology." Harrison approached carefully. The first few encounters between the Dragonlings and other crew members had been overwhelming for both sides. The dragon's empathic abilities meant they could sense emotions even from non-telepathic species, while the humans found themselves dealing with brief flashes of alien thoughts and feelings. "Hello, Aaron," Harrison said, keeping his voice gentle. "How are you feeling today?" The response came not just as words but as a complex emotional package that included physical sensations, memories, and abstract concepts. Harrison staggered slightly as his mind tried to process the information. "Much better, Dr. Harrison. Your medicines work well with our bodies. But we are curious. Your thoughts feel different from Dr. Chen's." More structured, Harrison glanced at Sarah with raised eyebrows. She'd briefed the medical team on the dragon's telepathic abilities, but experiencing them firsthand was something else entirely. "I suppose I am more systematic in my thinking," Harrison replied. "It's part of my training. Sarah here is more intuitive, more empathic. Perhaps that's why you connected with her so easily." From across the medical bay, Kirith lifted her head from where she'd been resting. The adolescent dragon had been more reserved than the others, still processing the trauma of losing her entire species. But her recovery had been remarkable, and Sarah could see growing confidence in her posture. "In our songs, there are different voices," Kirith offered, her mental voice carrying undertones of ancient melodies. "Bass notes that provide structure, harmony that adds emotion, melody that carries the story. Perhaps your species has different types of minds, like different parts of a song." Harrison looked fascinated. As a xenobiologist, he'd studied dozens of alien species, but none had been telepathic. The implications for understanding consciousness itself were staggering. "Could you show us one of these songs?" he asked carefully. The 5 Dragonlings exchanged glances, and Sarah could feel the rapid conversation happening between them. It reminded her of musicians tuning their instruments before a performance. "We will try," Aaron said finally. "But our songs were meant to be shared by hundreds, sometimes thousands of voices. With only 5 of us." "We understand," Sarah assured them. "Whatever you're comfortable sharing." What happened next took Sarah's breath away. The Dragonlings began to hum, but the sound was unlike anything she'd ever heard. It seemed to resonate not just in the air but through the deck plating of the ship itself. Harmonics built upon harmonics, creating a complex symphony that spoke directly to the soul. But more than the sound, Sarah could feel the meaning behind it. Images flowed through her mind, soaring through crystal cities, the joy of flight, the warmth of community. She saw dragons of all ages working together to build something beautiful, their combined telepathic abilities allowing them to coordinate with perfect precision. Then, the images shifted, showing her glimpses of dragon history. Ancient times when they first developed agriculture, the discovery of their telepathic gifts, the building of their great cities. She saw love stories and tragedies, heroes and villains, the full sweep of a civilization that had lasted for millennia. The song lasted only a few minutes, but when it ended, Sarah found tears streaming down her face. Around the medical bay, other crew members who had stopped to listen were similarly affected. Even the normally stoic Harrison was wiping his eyes. Harrison struggled to find words. "That was beautiful. And terrifying. To think that all of this is gone." "Not gone," Pip said, speaking for the first time since her rescue. Her voice was small and sweet, but carried a determination that reminded Sarah that these were not just children. They were the last representatives of their entire species. "We remember. And now you remember too." The door to the medical bay chimed, and Captain Maria Santos entered with 2 other officers. Sarah recognized Commander Liu from the Xenoarchaeology Department and Lieutenant Commander Torres from Communications. The captain's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could sense the tension in her posture. "Dr. Chun, I need to speak with you and our guests. We've received new orders from Earth Command." Sarah felt her heart sink. She'd been dreading this moment since they'd left Zirian Prime. The political implications of first contact with a telepathic species were enormous, and she'd known that sooner or later, the bureaucrats would want to get involved. "Of course, Captain," Sarah replied, moving to stand between the Dragonlings and the officers in an instinctively protective gesture. Captain Santos noticed the movement and held up a hand. "It's not what you think, Doctor. Or at least, not entirely. Earth Command is sending a full xenological team to meet us at Station Echo 7. But They're also authorizing us to offer the Dragonlings sanctuary on Earth, if they wish it. The surprise that flooded through the telepathic link from the Dragonlings was so intense that Sarah had to grab the nearby medical cart to steady herself. She could feel their disbelief, hope, and fear all tangled together in a complex emotional knot. Sanctuary, Aaron asked, his mental voice barely a whisper. A place to live safely, Captain Santos confirmed. We have several worlds with climates similar to Zirian Prime. You would be free to live as you choose, with whatever support you need to rebuild your lives. Commander Lu stepped forward, her expression gentle but professional. We're also very interested in documenting your history and culture, if you're willing to share. What we heard just now, it was extraordinary. Your people's knowledge shouldn't be lost. Kirith raised herself to a more upright position, and Sarah could feel the adolescent dragon gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her mental voice carried the weight of someone far older than her actual years. We are grateful for your offer. But we must ask, what do you want in return? The Zephyrians also offered us much, before they. Nothing, Captain Santos said firmly. We want nothing in return except the privilege of learning about your people and perhaps sharing some of our own culture with you. Humans believe that diversity makes us all stronger. The conversation that followed among the Dragonlings was intense and rapid, far too complex for Sarah to follow completely. She caught fragments, debates about trust, discussions of alternatives, memories of their destroyed world. Finally, they seemed to reach consensus. We would like to accept your offer, Aaron said. But we have conditions. Name them. Captain Santos replied without hesitation. First, we wish to return to Zirian Prime someday, to build a memorial for our people. Second, we want to learn about your species as much as you learn about ours. Third, the young dragon paused, and Sarah could sense him struggling with something difficult. Third, if any of our people survived elsewhere in the galaxy, we want to help find them. Captain Santos exchanged glances with her officers. Sarah could practically see the political calculations running through their minds. A memorial expedition would require resources and diplomatic clearance. Cultural exchange was standard procedure, but with telepaths, it would be far more complex. And mounting a galaxy-wide search for dragon survivors would be a massive undertaking. I can't make those decisions myself, Captain Santos said honestly. But I can promise you that I'll recommend Earth Command approve all three conditions. Your people deserve justice, and you deserve hope. Lieutenant Commander Torres cleared her throat. Captain, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications from this sector, and there are reports of Zephyrian ships moving towards Zirian Prime. They may be planning to finish what they started. The temperature in the medical bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah could feel rage pouring off the Dragonlings in waves so intense that several crew members stepped back unconsciously. Kirith's scales actually darkened, shifting from their normal blue-silver to deep crimson. They come to destroy what little remains, Kirith snarled, her mental voice carrying harmonics of fury that made Sarah's teeth ache. They would erase us completely from history. Not if we have anything to say about it, Captain Santos replied grimly. Commander Lu, I want a full archaeological survey team prepared for immediate deployment. If the Zephyrians want to destroy evidence of what they did, we're going to make sure the galaxy knows the truth first. What about us? Pip asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. Can we go with you? Absolutely not, Dr. Harrison interjected. You're still recovering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. The stress of returning to that place would be nothing compared to the stress of watching our world be destroyed while we hide in safety, Aaron finished. Dr. Harrison, we appreciate your concern, but this is our home, our people. We have a right to be there. Sarah found herself torn between her medical training and her growing understanding of dragon culture. From a purely medical standpoint, Harrison was right. The Dragonlings needed more time to recover. But she could feel their emotional need to be part of whatever happened to their world. There might be a compromise, she said slowly. What if we establish a secure mobile medical facility in orbit around Zirian Prime? The Dragonlings could monitor what's happening without being directly exposed to danger. Captain Santos considered this. It would be complicated, but doable. We could coordinate with the archaeological team and maintain a defensive perimeter in case the Zephyrians show up. They will show up, Kirith said with absolute certainty. Our people's songs contain power, Dr. Chun. Not just beauty, but actual power. The crystal structures of our cities were grown using harmonic frequencies that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. If the Zephyrians find the song archives. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. The Zephyrians weren't just trying to cover up genocide. They were after dragon technology. How much time do we have? Commander Liu asked. Unknown, Torres replied. But the Zephyrian fleet is moving faster than normal patrol speed. I'd estimate maybe a week before they reach Zirian Prime. Captain Santos stood and began pacing, a sure sign that she was running through contingencies. All right, here's what we're going to do. Liu, I want your archaeological team ready to deploy in 6 hours. We're going to Zirian Prime, and we're going to document everything we can before the Zephyrians arrive. She turned to Harrison. Doctor, I need your medical assessment. Can the Dragonlings travel in a week? Harrison looked at his patients, then at his scanner readings. Medically, yes, with proper life support. Psychologically, I think they need to be there. Dr. Chun, you'll coordinate medical support for the archaeological mission. And the captain paused, looking directly at the Dragonlings. I want you 5 to help us understand what we're looking for. Your people's history is about to become evidence in the court of galactic opinion. The transformation that came over the Dragonlings was remarkable. The despair and resignation that had marked their rescue was completely gone, replaced by a sense of purpose that Sarah could feel radiating from them in waves. We will help, Aaron said, speaking for all of them. Our people's songs will not be silenced. The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. The archaeological team worked around the clock to assemble their equipment, while the medical staff prepared portable facilities to support both the human team and the recovering Dragonlings. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being both primary physician and xenocultural liaison. The Dragonlings threw themselves into the preparations with an energy that worried Sarah from a medical standpoint, but impressed her from a personal one. They worked together to compile lists of important sites, cultural artifacts that should be prioritized, and technical specifications for the harmonic equipment their people had used. The Grand Archive is most important, Kirith explained, projecting a mental image of a crystalline spot